Let's start our look at Priority's project management capabilities by creating a project. I have projects on my desktop, so all I need to do is click on the icon in order to go into the projects form. I'm going to search up a customer, and I'm going to say that this is a construction project. And you'll see that the system automatically allocates the default project manager and the status of this project. But of course I can come back and edit those as I like, and the status will be governed by the BPM. I want to go ahead and start planning this project. So if I click on the project planning tile, I can start creating activities. These are the phases of the project. So in this case, I'm going to start with the site survey, and I'm going to continue with a design, and then I'm going to go to the build. But within the build, I'm going to have two sub activities. So I'm going to have a build of the ground floor, and I think you can predict what the next one's going to be. And then I'm going to finish with an inspection. Now you'll notice, based on my coding, that the system automatically determines what's known as the depth, so whether these are the main activities or sub-levels, and you can have as many levels of activity as you want in building a tree. Now that we've created the basic structure of the project plan, we might want to flesh in a few details. On any row, so for any of the activities, if I take a different view so that I can see just the fields that apply to that activity, most importantly, we may well want to start allocating resources, plan a number of hours for the activity, set an expected end date for the activity for scheduling purposes, and each activity can have its own status. But also we can set whether the activity has a milestone, and the result of that is that billing will be prevented for example, sub-activities until the relevant milestone has been marked as 100% complete. So I've completed the plan for the project by setting up these activities. I've also added in some realistic dates for each of those. If I highlight any of the activities, I can go down and start planning the purchases against it in the BOM for Activities subform. So in this case, I'm going to go down and put in a part number that I already know for some bulldozer rental, and I might go with the cost if there is a cost in the system, or I might actually manually place the cost. I also need to dictate how this is going to go through purchasing, whether this is going through a purchase order or whether there's actually a purchase demand. And in this case, I'm expecting 30 calendar days of rental, and I want to apply that straight away. And the final part is, who am I going to buy this from? So I can put the vendor details in, and I can record this for starting to purchase. So that's all that's necessary for every part that I want to budget for the project. But not only are you budgeting it, but you're also dictating how to raise this for with a purchase order. So we now want to raise one or more purchase orders for this project. So I'm going to save the project by exiting from it and going to the menu option for opening purchase orders for projects. And what you'll see is that this gives a number of options. I'm going to accept the defaults, and what it will throw to the screen is the project number. So if I actually record that I'm interested in picking up all projects, and we'll pick up specifically the construction project that we've been working with, then by accepting that, that is all that's necessary in order to do the automated purchasing. So Priority will go through and will create any necessary purchase orders. If we go back into the project that we were working with before, we'll be able to look at the purchase order that got created. So if we drop down into the subform for the planning, and then within the planning, we were working on the ground floor. We can go into the BOM for the activity, and if we drop down further, then if we go to from the BOM for the activity to the order items per part, here you'll see the actual purchase order that got created. And if we want to drill right into the purchase order itself, then we have the drill down capability in Priority in order to inspect the purchase order. Okay, I'm going to come out of the purchase order and go back into the project that we were working with. I want to stay on the same form, but I want to talk about labour, not about the purchase ordering. So you have another subform of the project planning subform called resources for activity, and this is where you can plan your labour. Typically, we wouldn't start allocating people at this stage. We'd simply record the type of labour that we're actually interested in, and then specify, if we now take another view of all of this information, we would also be interested in the number of hours of work that we're expecting, and typically the cost would have come through, but if we actually put that in manually, then that gives us the complete picture for this one particular task. And we can have as many different steps, as many different resources for the activity as we like to build out the complete plan for labour on the project. If we want to start getting a picture of what's actually going on in overview on this project, we should probably best go up to the top level again and run the calculate cumulative planning. Now what this does is it aggregates all of the costs. So if we look at, for example, the planning tile, you'll see that there are cumulative costs in the planning side. But also, if we want to go to planning and execution as the subform, we can start looking at the planned cost versus actual costs, and everything in between, in effect. We've also got the ability to look at the revenue and profit on the project, so we can start to get a very clear picture of where we are. The next thing we probably want to do is start getting time and expenses as actuals against the project. And there are a number of ways of doing this. It is possible to load those directly into the project itself on the reports of project hours and expenses. But I'm going to go in and do this as a timesheet. So you'll notice that there's a report of project hours and expenses, which in this case is not linked to the specific project. So for this one, all we need to do is specify a date, employee, project number, and we will be building out the what was being worked on. So we will link it to the ground floor aspect of the project that we were working with, the stage, and say that that was from 9 till 5:30. And we also have control over whether we're costing travel time into all of this and the costs that will be used. So all of that rolls up into the actual costs on the project. In some instances, people will want not to enter it on this kind of timesheet, but actually to bring it in from a separate time recording system. And there's loading capability within the software for doing just that. Just to point out a couple of extra issues on the purchase order. I created the purchase order, I added an additional physical item to it. I also allocated the purchase order to a project-specific warehouse. This is typically the actual customer site where goods are going to be drop shipped to, but it doesn't have to be. It can be part of your main warehouse allocated to the project. The status I've set to authorized so that the BPM will allow us actually to do a goods receipt. So that's the purchase order. If we want to do a receiving step for both the physical items and the rental items that were on a purchase order, all we need to do is go in just as we would for an inventory item and pick up the purchase order number, and there you'll see on the received items that the items are there with a quantity of 0. We can set whatever quantity we actually want to receive. I'm going to receive everything in full. But that's the process of actually receiving the items against the project. Back on our project, let's go back to that. It's now time to build this project. So let's pick up the job details from the project. And if we're going to do stage payments, then go to payments for project. And for each stage payment, just set a date. It'll give you the default text, but you can override the default text if you want to. And then set the amount. And if it's going to be linked to a sales order, then pull in the sales order for linking as well. But otherwise, that's all you need to do in order to set the amounts for the installments for revenue. You can have as many of these as you like, but then remember that you've also got time and materials, so the labour that you've actually recorded can be collected as well. So when you're ready for all of this, then you need to run the invoicing. By now you should be ready to bill, and by that I mean, have you put all the relevant quantities of labour and materials against the project? Have you set up the stage payments in the payments for the project? Once you're happy with all of that, select the prepare invoices option. Now this is in effect a wizard which needs to be fed information. I'm going to say I want just the selected projects, and in this case it pulls up a form where I get the chance to pick up the construction project that we've been working with. Once we're happy with that, simply select it and exit the form. And that runs the prepare invoices routine and will create the invoices that we want. As you can see, the prepare invoices routine next comes up with some parameters, which I'm now going to complete with the transaction dates from and to that we're going to include within our billing, and also the date of the invoice itself. And once you're happy with all the dating, then simply OK the routine. That will go through and raise the necessary invoices. So you can see 2 invoices were opened, numbers T59 and 60. Let's just run a few very quick reports to see the impact of what we've done. If we run the planning and execution by labour and material, that provides a table for, I'll do it for just the one project we've been working on. And what you see is that for each of the stages of the report of the project at various levels of detail, we have labour and material and totals figures split by planning and actuals plus percentage figures. If we look at the next report, which is the revenue and profit, this is very much a summary report, which provides, again, for the one project, but you can run it for any number of projects, the headline figures for revenue, cost, profitability, and projected forward. And then the final one, which we'll just pick on for the moment, is to look at the estimated cost to complete, and those you can control the data in the project record itself. But as you can see, this comes up with the figures. Again, for each of the activities that have any cost against them at all, the planned, the actual plus the estimated cost to finish, giving total balances.